Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Beyond DEI Awareness, Moving from Words to Action. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credit. You will receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days. It will include the certification credit information. You may also log into your hr.com account and view the credit that you have received. If you have any questions during the webcast, click on Q&A in your webinar controls and type them in. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator, Mariella Marie.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, HR.com, and thank you everyone for joining today's first session. We are really excited to share virtual space with you today. Beyond DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion awareness, moving from words to action with Grow Dialogue. It is my pleasure to facilitate this live Q&R. I like to say Q&R so that we can reflect together as we are diving into deep waters here in this new DEI space that we are all building together. So before I introduce our keynote today, I'll just take a couple moments to introduce myself. So my name is Mariella Marie, originally from Los Angeles, California. I currently live in Patagonia and San Martin de los Andes, the original lands of the Mapuche people. And I love speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence at home, at work, and at play. So I might bring some of my responses to that note if anyone's interested in philosophizing or finding actionable steps on how we can improve and deepen our emotional intelligence. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me there under Mariella Marie, or you can write to me in the chat. And yes, I would love to connect with you all. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sundiata Soon-Jahta. Before we dive into these awesome questions that folks have submitted previous to this conversation, we'd love to learn a little bit about yourself, what you do at Grow Dialogue, and what you're excited to share today.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Mariella. And thank you, HR.com, for putting on this very important conference on this very important topic. I'm really excited to be with all of you today. And as you see on your screen, I'm Dr. Sundiata Soon-Jahta, and I'm a collaboration, conflict resolution, and thriving culture specialist. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and over 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur, educator, social change agent, and organizational leader. And I like to say that my consultation is informed by both theory and practice, because not only have I done all the book work, but I've also rolled up my sleeves and I've been, at the grassroots and on the ground, doing the work with running teams and leading teams and working within teams up under, amazing leadership as well. So really happy to be here to share some insights that I've gained along the way with you all. You can find me and connect with me on LinkedIn at Dr. Soon-Jahta. And I look forward to sharing more and answering your questions as we get a little bit deeper into the conversation.
Awesome. So I know you're probably going to share more about yourself as we roll into our questions. But before we set the stage here, I just want to remind folks who are joining us, we'd love to have you participate in this conversation. You could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to be with us. So we appreciate your presence. And with that said, please feel free to drop any questions or reflections in the chat, any of your own tips and tricks. And if anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, you can write to me in the chat. Just find me under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately there, and I will raise your question or your reflection to Dr. Sundiata and keep you anonymous. We would also encourage you to follow Grow Dialogue so that you can give us feedback. We are so interested in hearing what you have to say about the work that we're doing, and we would love to work with you. So we encourage you to follow us. And at the end, we will be giving out a survey with HR.com. And again, we would just love to continue to grow with you all. So Dr. Soon-Jahta, let's set the stage. I know that diversity, equity, and inclusion are becoming some big buzzwords. And, a part of our work here at Grow Dialogue is to make sure that we are practicing what we preach and we're not condoning any performative allyship and all that jazz. So I would love to have you set the stage for us before we approach these questions that folks have submitted previous to the conversation. So tell us about the reasons why many DEI efforts fail. Let's start there, and then we'll move on to these other bubbles in a minute. But I'd love to have you can dive as deep as you'd like, or you can, scratch the surface and continue to develop them in the questions. But tell us some of the reasons why many DEI efforts fail.
Sure, absolutely. And actually, before we get into, I actually have 3 key reasons why why so many DEI efforts fail. I want to talk a little bit about how we even got here. Now, diversity initiatives started initially in the 1960s in corporate spaces, and they've since ebbed and flowed over the years in terms of their implementation and impact. And we arrived in 2020. Well, I'll say like this. All of a sudden, we arrived in 2020 with several highly publicized cases of racial injustice, and that caused an increase in corporate investments into DEI initiatives. Now, obviously, equity and inclusion and the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion came along before 2020, but we never saw the amount of adoption and interest that we saw in 2020 prior to 2020, where pretty much now in 2022, every corporation, in America, I'll speak to, let's say, North America, has a DEI committee, if not a director of diversity, equity, inclusion for their entire organization in North America, as well as around the globe. So it's something that all organizations have now made room for. They're investing in, they're bringing in outside consultants, et cetera. And even with all of that investment, a 2021 Forbes survey across respondents in corporate America reported that up to 53% don't believe that their employer is meeting its DEI goals. And employees from diverse groups continue to express feelings of being undervalued, excluded, and marginalized. So why is that? Why, with all this attention, why with all this investment, are employees still feeling that way? And that's what we're going to dive deeper into. So I told you I have 3 reasons. All right. So the first reason is that most DEI training programs are typically administered company-wide, and they aim to create high levels of awareness of DEI issues. But when it comes to practical behavior change post-training, employees are usually left without practical advice on what to do next. Okay, that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, businesses are prioritizing diversity without putting equitable and inclusive systems in place to support a diverse work culture. The reality is, before you can truly create a diverse workforce, you must commit to equitable and inclusive initiatives that support all employees. And number 3, your company just won't invest the time. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into that. And this comes from experience with Grow Dialogue and working with organizations out there where the check the box mentality still exists. Okay, and I'm here to share with you all that let me expand on that. What do I mean by that? This idea that you can have a one-off training and you've done enough. That's not how this works. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially the equity and inclusion and belonging part of that DEIB, for those who take on all 4 of those acronyms, it takes, the type of behavior change that it takes to really embed those ideals into your culture. It takes consistent action. It takes consistent structure towards, creating the conditions necessary to have those behavior changes. And so many organizations are used to the status quo where they can say, hey, we had a DEI training and we created this awareness, so we did it. We are DEI certified to some degree. Or they'll have a committee, and oftentimes what I'm learning from engaging with these various committees is that they bring in speakers, they bring in trainers, and it's something they've done ongoing. And I think that's very valuable. Let me say that. It's very valuable. But that's what I like to call DEI 1.0. But in terms of DEI 2.0, which is behavior change, that's where it takes an investment in time of ongoing, committed behavior changing processes that, I'll say this, based on what I've been seeing out there in our work, either A, a lot of organizations don't have the skill sets and the knowledge to do it, or B, they're not willing to invest the time because there's still so many competing priorities. They're still focused on the bottom line. And I understand, those competing priorities, but for those really visionary organizations, those organizations that are going to lead organizations that are going to be sustainable into the future, those are the ones who are committing the time to continually showing up and engaging with their teams on how they can take the necessary steps to implement the necessary structures for that behavior change to occur. Does that make sense what I've just shared, Mariella?
Absolutely. And thank you for just, setting the stage there. I know we've already got folks in the chat box, asking for clarification, because I know sometimes we can get lost in these acronyms, right? So I find that it's important just to reiterate diversity, equity, inclusion. The B is for belonging, for those of you who are asking questions in the chat. And I would even propose that, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging needs to be a part of the bottom line so that time can, be put aside in order to grow that. So thank you for calling that out. And also thank you for sharing, your experience on the ground, working with certain companies and seeing over time what has been happening and, the call to action essentially. What do we do when we see, that we are called to do this, but maybe we don't have the time or we have other priorities. So, keeping the human in the center, putting the data, the bottom line, the numbers and everything like that in the peripheral, I think it's important as well. Yes, yes.
The interesting thing is it does impact the bottom line because, when we talk about attrition and we talk about employee burnout and we talk about how there's stats about how a large percentage of employees don't feel connected in the workplace. And so all of these things are a result of not prioritizing DEIB. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and say DEIB. And they're a result of that. So many organizations get so caught up in what they think are the necessary actions, the old behaviors that will create, bottom line success. And they're churning and burning, selling, creating. And what's happening is down the line, there's an opportunity cost to that, because down the line, when employees are leaving and they're having to continually, pay recruiters or, go through the process of onboarding and, all the costs for, employee turnover, that impacts the bottom line. And, it takes visionary leadership to see that and to be proactive and do something about it at the forefront, as opposed to continually to put out fires, downstream.
Absolutely. I love that. So I love the call to stand up as visionary leaders. And we've spoken about this before, even if we don't hold the title of leadership or, up the ladder, we are all leaders. We can all influence, even if it's, little by little. So thank you for calling that out. Now, I know that you have an interesting tool that you share with different companies and individuals that is called the Change Up tool. So can you explain a little bit more, the second bubble here, what the Change Up process is and how it works?
Sure. So, I just said a lot, within answering that first question and kind of talking about why so many efforts fail. And one of the reasons why, or one of the realities is that even though a lot of companies and organizations, want to do what's best, a lot of them just don't know how. They don't have the necessary tools. And, I was at a summit, an executive summit in Atlanta recently where, DEI leaders and L&D leaders from some of the largest companies around the world were present. And, they were honest and just saying that they're making this up as they go. This is a brand new, industry. It's a brand new, job title and committees, et cetera. And a lot of them just don't have the necessary tools. So that's why I'm really excited about, the role that we play in this space, with Grow Dialogue, because we're able to bring in tools that were developed in grassroots organizations that were designed to create that structure and accountability around creating behavior change on a small scale. And then we've been able to adopt it to being able to apply it within organizations of any size so that it's scalable as well. So when we see the term change up tool, that is one of the processes that I'm talking about. I use tool process interchangeably, the change up tool, change up process. So you'll hear me use it interchangeably. But the change up, or let me say it like this, change up is an agile change management tool inspired by the agile methodology and consent-based decision-making. The tool was created by Grow Dialogue partner Thomas Parker and a group of collaborators for the Agile Learning Center network. So agile methodology, for those of you who are in the tech space, I'm sure you've come across agile. So agile methodology in this context is about iteration, emergence, and collaboration. It's about breaking down goals and objectives into small pieces, tweaking and adapting practices based on collective experience. So let's talk about what consent-based decision-making is. So consent-based decision-making seeks to find solutions that are good enough for now and safe enough to try for everyone impacted by the decision. Decisions that are good enough for now allow for decisions to be made quickly while also acknowledging that change is inevitable and the fact that navigating that change is built into the process. Decisions that are safe enough to try ensure equity, because if someone feels undervalued, excluded, or marginalized by a proposed solution, then they can withhold their consent and propose a revised solution. And the try part of this process, again, acknowledges that change is inevitable and helps to foster psychological safety and deeper trust, because it signals that the proposed solution can always be iterated in the future if necessary. So I'll pause there. Any clarity needed? Please drop your questions in the chat if there's any clarity needed on that. Marielle, do you feel like there's anything that needs to be teased out with that?
I think you did a great job giving us, the big holistic vision of the change up tool. And I want to reiterate that I love that the core of it is consent based. I don't think we see a lot of that in our current modern society, especially the way that technology and, the whole algorithm and, paid marketing and all that kind of doesn't really allow us to give our consent, or maybe we get, kicked off of social media or things like that. So I love that you are taking something that we're struggling with as a society, as a modern society, and putting it in this process and this tool to help us develop our initiatives. Jill writes in the chat, I agree with the emphasis that it has to go beyond training and committees and has to address the processes in place to have sustainable change. So thank you, Jill, for writing that. So let's move on to the next bubble here so that we can approach some questions. I see some questions coming in the chat, and we've also got some previously submitted questions. How have you seen, Sundiata, how have teams been able to use the Change Up tool to achieve work objectives and diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging goals simultaneously?
Sure. So the way that this tool works is that teams display their DEI goals, okay, and objectives on a Kanban board. Now, this board can be physical or digital, okay? I've seen some teams and organizations where they'll have a whiteboard up in the office and they'll use sticky notes to facilitate this process of proposing solutions and moving them along the iterative process. Also, there's several digital tools like Trello, which is one that I use often, but again, most of you who have project management software, Kanban boards are built into those. So you can use either or. And during change-up meetings, team members raise awarenesses about misalignments between their day-to-day operations and those DEI objectives, okay? And a change-up meeting facilitator then helps the team go through a process that includes matching the awareness to a specific need or core value, proposing a solution, and revising the solution until everyone consents that is good enough for now and safe enough to try. And in subsequent meetings, the proposed solution is revisited to determine if it needs to be changed up in order to remain in alignment after its initial trial period. So I just want to point out to you all, before giving you a real life example that we from a client, how literally diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is built into the process of everything I just shared with you. So I'm gonna start with diversity. So diversity, okay. In addition to ethnic diversity, depending on the makeup of your team, I don't know, some organizations are very diverse in terms of if we're just talking ethnicity and gender, as well as, cultural backgrounds. Diversity can mean a lot of different things, in terms of how we show up, right? So I'm imagining a diverse work team or company. So if a diverse group of people are in the room, you're automatically going to get diversity in thoughts and perspectives on any given topic. Okay. Now, here's where equity comes in. Through this process, because everyone has a chance to everyone has to consent to whatever the proposed solution is to the misalignment, then that's where equity comes into play, because everyone has a voice. Okay. And they can say, if something doesn't feel good, they can explain why. Okay. And this brings about learning from each other. And then they can propose a revised solution that takes everyone else's needs into consideration as well as their own, and continue to work towards something that feels good enough for now and safe enough to try. Okay. And then inclusion. The whole process is inclusive because everyone has a voice. Now, if the proposed solution is solid and it feels good, and no one speaks up or the majority doesn't speak up, they still feel included because at least they had an opportunity to do so. Okay. And just through this whole process of being able to, meet regularly, monthly is what we suggest and recommend for our clients, to have this check-in process on the DEI goals and objectives that the team comes up with together, or they help, some organizations have an outside organization come in and help them, create their DEI goals and objectives. But then that month-to-month meeting where they're holding themselves accountable using the structure of this process, where they get a chance to speak up and say, what we're doing over here isn't aligned with the goal right here, right? And then they all get to kind of talk and listen and learn from one another. That process, that collaborative process, garners so many feelings of belonging, because everyone's being included, it's equitable, and the diverse voices are being heard. So DEI-B is built into the entire process. All right, so let me give you a real life example. So we work with the team to help them create a culture statement. As you all know, a lot of organizations out here have culture statements. And within the culture statement, let me say this, we help them co-create a culture statement. That's very important, okay? Because it wasn't something top down. They brought us in to help them co-create it, because we have a process where we get input from everyone on the team, and we, consolidate that into a culture statement where everyone can see themselves in it, okay? So now, again, it feels like that, and it garners those feelings of belonging. Now, within the culture statement that we helped this team create, were the words that they would be a shared learning team. So in a subsequent meeting, an awareness was highlighted that shared learning was missing from the day-to-day operations. And the underlying need and value to learn, and the underlying needs were the value to learn, feel more connected, and collaborate to win. Those were some of the values that they co-created together. And those are the ones that they highlighted were at the forefront of this awareness. And then someone proposed a solution to create a 3-person committee to organize a shared learning masterclass where teammates would send in a topic request, and then someone else would volunteer to speak on that area if that was their expertise. So they noticed that there was kind of like, there was these groups of people who had access to this information and knowledge, who were more experienced, and then there were others who weren't. And they were like, how can we, merge those groups of people, help one another, and absolutely help us to win, do our jobs better, learn faster, from each other, and be intentional about that. So not only did it, again, highlight, not only did it hold them accountable, to their culture statement, not only did it create a process for creating the behavior change that they wanted to see, but it also helped them to be more effective at their day-to-day jobs. All right. So that is an example, a real life example of how teams use change up to accomplish goals, their DEI or culture objectives and their work objectives simultaneously.
Awesome. And I mean, I love to see this. I love that you gave the real life example, because it's like, it can go several different ways. All of a sudden becomes this forest, ecosystem of what can happen when you say that, we want this to be co-creative. We don't want to just change some words on a paper and make that the policy and ask everyone to read it and leave it at that. We don't want to just check a box. We want to participate, and so that people can feel invested and feel heard, and then see what can grow from that new ecosystem. So I really appreciate the real life example here. So we've actually, could you cite a couple examples of culture statement here, Linda, in the chat box, right? So could you cite a couple examples of culture statements? Or, and I would also invite people who are listening now, if you all have worked on, creating a culture statement together, if you have something that you like to propose to your team, I'd love to see if there can be some transparency here with our live audience. And I would ask you all, as Sundiata responds to this question, do you all have some examples of culture statements that we can share in the chat and maybe read out loud? But Sundiata, what do you have to say about that question?
Yeah, great question. I didn't come prepared, with culture statements, so I don't. However, if you Google organizational culture statements or culture statements, you'll get a whole list of them.
Great. And I'm still curious to see if anyone on the call has any that they'd like to share and put forth, just to encourage us all and to inspire us all also. All right, so thank you for this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can pull up these awesome questions that folks have submitted. I'd love to get kicked off with a previously submitted question, and then Jill, I see your question here. Sorry, Alicia, I see your question here in the chat. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, so how to overcome the barrier where, on one hand, diversity, equity, inclusion is a distraction to the business, not a valuable asset. And on the other hand, shouldn't we be over this by now? So I appreciate the transparency on submitting this question. So again, I'll read it again. How to overcome the barrier where, on the one side, DEI is a distraction to the business, not a valuable asset. And on the other side, shouldn't we be over this by now?
Yeah, great question. And it really does capture what a lot of people out there are dealing with within their companies, where they feel like it's more of a distraction. And that's basically I guess the energy from leadership. That's that's the culture, that's what they're feeling. And that's not good. That's a telltale sign of an organization that is doing more performative DEI than more embracing it genuinely and authentically. And what I would say to anyone that finds themselves in a situation like that, if you truly value that job, you truly value that position that you're in, is being the change, being the change that you want to see. And I would suggest getting with a small group, try to find your allies, your like-minded folks within the company, and starting to carve out time to meet and take initiative to create opportunities for other people to learn and grow. And take an initiative like joining a training like this and others that are out there and learning new skills, and then bringing that to your organization and being persistent and inviting others in, to learn more and continue to be a voice and continue to be vocal about the importance of this. And what I can share is that the leaders in the company will take notice. And this is something that, whether it's that company or companies going forward, that you can leverage to show leadership, your own personal leadership development, by you taking initiative in these ways. So don't wait, don't wait, again, be the change. If others see that you're carving out time in your day, your week, your month to prioritize this and inviting others to do the same, that will have a trickle effect, or let's say it can have a trickle effect where, again, you are being the change you want to see, and you ultimately be a catalyst for changing the culture at that company.
I love that response. And just to piggyback on what you're saying in the introduction, I would encourage this person to find the data that can back up why it's important, and why this is a valuable asset, and why you will get a big return on investment, and show there's so much data that is being populated now.
Yes.
So that can maybe encourage your team and your folks to make this, to not consider it a distraction, and actually to consider it an objective, to lean into more. So I appreciate that. I wanted to tie those ends because you mentioned it in the introduction there.
That's perfect.
All right, so let's, yeah, my pleasure. Let's move on to the next question here. How do you motivate all stakeholders to get involved? So how do you motivate all stakeholders to get involved?
So I think again, I think one being realistic, that you're probably not going to motivate all stakeholders to get involved. Being realistic with that, and then focusing on again the ones who you can attract, the ones who are interested, and then you all doing the work, and again what Mariella just said, continuing to share out the value in it, the information, what the opportunity costs are, in terms of lack of feelings of connection, the attrition, whatever your diverse work team, things that may be said during water cooler talk, kind of surfacing those things that, anonymously, not giving names, but just, sharing with leadership. These are the things that we're dealing with, and here's a way that we can address it. So every time you address an issue, you come with a solution. And if you consistently show up and do that, and coupled with what I just said with answering the previous question and what Mariella just shared, I don't think that you're going to motivate, I think more so inspire, inspire through your actions and your leadership, the change that you want to see.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, to reiterate as well, we've done some conversations about this before in the past. We're not asking folks to take on a whole new role, because I know that we were seeing a lot of that, as you said, in the start of 2020, when this became, companies were like, okay, we need to invest in this. And they were asking people on their employees to essentially take on a whole new role, to be bringing this awareness to their teams and to the company. So, we're definitely asking everyone to respect their boundaries, and to not, and to advocate that, this is something that needs investing. And if you don't have the time to do it, then maybe, to figure out how to negotiate more time or get more people or more trainings involved so that you can focus on doing the work that you're doing. So just wanted to highlight that, because we do hear folks out there that, they are looking for the support. They don't have the time because they have their other work objectives to contribute to. So yes, that spark of inspiration and putting, the effort to show different solutions, I think, as Sundiata said, can be very helpful. All right, so I'm going to start to answer some live questions here coming up in the chat. So Alicia writes, my organization has been working on a DEI initiative for the past 2 years. We are a nonprofit with limited funds for this initiative. I have spent the last years educating myself about the DEI space. How does a company with minimal knowledge and experience make a lasting impact?
Yeah, well, one, I want to say, thank you. You've already started that process. You said you spent the last 2 years educating yourself on this space, and it seems like, based on your question, are you the only one at your company doing this? And also, I would like to know, have you been able to, put forth any initiatives based on what you've learned in the last 2 years, or is just kind of like a personal journey? That's my question to you, Alicia. But what I would say is, everyone has limited, knowledge on this topic, again, because it's emerging. It's an emergent, space and emergent language around how we're addressing these issues. And what I would say is, continuing to show up to trainings such as this, taking the tools that you gain through these type of conversations and the things that you're learning, and then starting to implement them. And what I want to really, really leave you all with is the understanding that change takes time. Change is fractal. Like, little change matters. Putting one foot in front of the other, literally day in and day out. As long as you're doing something, you are being the change that you want to see. But I would definitely, start, if you don't have a committee, I would start one, and you all continue to brainstorm and move closer to, your goals and the things that you feel like are needed, for your organization to start really showing up in a way that honors diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and also holding leaders accountable. One of the things when I interface with a client who's a leader at one of the largest companies in the world, one of the things that she shared with her team, through one of our sessions, is that she wanted them to feel more empowered. And she wanted them to speak up and not be afraid of her because she has a title. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to hold her accountable. Don't be afraid to push back on some of the things that she says. And she shared with them that, one of the reasons why she's in the position that she's in is because she wasn't afraid to do that in her journey of climbing the corporate ladder. So a lot of times, that's when I say visionary leadership, it starts with you. Like Mariella said at the beginning, we're all leaders. We all can be leaders, right? And you can start displaying these efforts and, again, just taking that initiative, just doing it, being the change. I like to say, be the change, be the change. Hold your leaders accountable. Hold them accountable. Don't let them off the hook. This is important. And there's so many resources. If you start Googling, why is DEI important? I'm sure you'll get so many, resources that include statistics and data that will support why the efforts that you're trying to implement in your company are needed. All right. And you can find a lot of them at, and I hate to plug, but at our LinkedIn page, there's tons of resources that, if you follow Grow Dialogue's LinkedIn page, you can get tons of resources that kind of help you, give you the language around these things as well. And stats. We have statistical content that's out there as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we've got some questions coming up in the chat. I'd love to give voice to some of them here. Just piggybacking off what you just said with that thorough response, Sundiata, a question comes up. What if the action is leaving a company because you feel uncomfortable at how tone deaf your organization is to the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Do you share that when you leave, or is it not your battle?
So great question, Nicole. So I have shared in the past when we've done webinars like this, that if you feel like your organization is completely tone deaf and you've done it, you've kind of showed up in the ways that, I've proposed to the best of your ability, and you feel like literally no one there is interested, you're getting, the runaround, or they're not giving you any time of day to do anything or support at all. And also it just doesn't align with you and who you are and your values. The company and the work in general just doesn't align, because I know that's something that we all have to balance, and only the answer to that. This is a place that really feels comfortable, but this is the issue, or if this is an issue and there's other issues. And if that's the case, I personally would look around and try to find a home that was more aligned with my values, a place that I feel like I can, make a significant impact and change. And I know that everyone doesn't have that luxury of doing that. And that can, the idea of finding a new job can be really tough. So, that's something for each of you to kind of, weigh. But yeah, I think that it is definitely a viable option, Nicole, to look around.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Nicole. Thank you for your reflection there, Sundiata. All right, let's move on to another question here. I was recently hired as the DEI leader, and while I have the support of the SLT, including budgetary support, most of the objections are coming from a very loud, mostly white group of people who want change now. It looks very much like performative allyship. What suggestions would you offer for making change and addressing the performative patterns while still creating effective strategy?
Yeah, wow, that's an interesting position to be in, Cassandra. So you have the position, so that says a lot about your company, and you have budgetary support. Amazing. So I guess I'm kind of confused. I don't know if you have the capacity to kind of give me a follow-up on this, but when you say that most of the objections are coming from the loud group of people, but then you say they want change now. So I'm kind of confused behind objections versus wanting change now. I'm trying to understand what the tension is with that. If you can add any clarity, I'm going to continue to speak to it. But if you can follow, kind of add some context in the chat directly to Mariella or here in the Q&A portion of what the tension is within that. Like, what's the objection? If they want change now, it feels like they're ready. So what's the objection? But then you say it looks like performative allyship. Okay. So here's where, you know, what I can share is that there's processes that we teach that they're the only processes that I know that we can move beyond performative DEI 1.0, behavior. I'm sorry, actions towards authenticity. And there's a process and a framework around communication called authentic dialogue that we teach at Grow Dialogue, and through this process, you hear it in the name, authentic dialogue. By creating the space to get face to face with your teammates and have authentic dialogues, and it's a framework that you can learn. But having authentic dialogues, it tears away all of the performative, all of the smoke and mirrors, all of the walls. It's impossible to continue to do the performative, things if you're engaging in authentic dialogue on a consistent basis. It's going to give you all the tools necessary to confront objectives. Let's say confront objections that you mentioned, objections, to confront tension and conflict, to make decisions collaboratively, and to learn from one another in a deep way so that the efforts aren't performative. So that's one thing. And then the change-up tool, it then holds you accountable, again, by consistently meeting month in and month out. It holds you accountable to being who you say you want to be. So I imagine if you're a DEI leader, you have DEI goals and objectives that you came up with as a company. And now it's like, then what? How do I hold these people accountable? Well, that's where the change-up tool, or if there's any other tool out there or process out there to that's similar that you all know of or whatever, that's what these things are for, to prevent what you're saying. And I'm going into the chat because I see that you added some context, so I'm going to read that.
Yeah, I can read it for you so that everyone can hear and just digest out loud. Because Cassandra, I don't think you're the only one in this situation, so I love that we're giving time to this. Thank you for the clarity here. So the clarification is they are very much, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Why hasn't the senior leaders done anything? Why haven't the senior leaders done anything? It's been 45 days and it feels like the desire is to have a quick fix to systemic problems.
Yeah.
And then she also writes that it seems like some of the tensions are clearly there from before I started and may have nothing to do with the DEIB in the org. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Cassandra, for that clarity and context. And here's what I'll share. One, I empathize with you. And I also see it as a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, for you to, impact change. And, hopefully you heard something here that I've shared that you can take with you to either, to go out and get access to resources that will give you that structure and accountability that you and your teammates are looking for to hold leadership accountable in the tools and processes. Again, whether it's myself or our company Grow Dialogue or another company that does similar work, hopefully you've heard something that will give you insight into what's missing and what you need. So now you can go out and get it. I hope that makes sense. And then also, I just want to let you know that, again, I was at this summit with executives from, the largest companies in the world, and they all said, we are making this up as we go. So let your colleagues know to please be patient, because we are doing this, this is an emergent, area, change doesn't happen overnight. Please be patient. We're going to do this, and let them know I'm going to trainings like the ones at HR.com. I'm learning things, and we're going to get this done. And just thank them for their enthusiasm, but also ask them for patience and grace, and let them know that you hear them. And maybe create a system where they can kind of like email and drop them, and just let them know I'm listening, I'm reading, but give me time to implement solutions to your concerns.
And I love that this ties in perfectly with the need for authentic dialogue. So I love that authentic dialogue is at the core of the work that that you're doing with Grow Dialogue. And I would just love to just reiterate that it is a way of fostering accountability across teams. So, there was a question that was submitted as far as, how do you speak up to a manager or, to leadership if you see that basically performative allyship is happening. And I want to answer that question with proposing another question here for you to chew on, and for Sundiata to crack open here. So this question reads, how do you encourage authentic conversations around diversity when you are the only person in your demographic in the room? Is there a limit to how vulnerable is too vulnerable before you're just a token or a martyr?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and I think that that's something that each individual has to measure. They have to measure if they're in an environment that is conducive to their well-being. I think you have to measure that, because I think the answer to that is going to be different for each of you who may have that issue. So if you're having those feelings, I think that personal well-being is paramount, above and beyond any job title, any dollar amount. I feel like you have to get into a place where you feel good laying your head on the pillow at night, and you feel good waking up in the morning and going somewhere where you feel like your humanity is honored. And if that's not the case, I personally couldn't stay in an environment like that at all. So that's my answer to that question.
Yes. So maybe that's something, as you were hinting on in the beginning, everyone has seen or lots of folks are seeing in the media now, this great resignation. So I love that we're talking about that without necessarily speaking to that. If you have your diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives in place, or at least you're fostering authentic dialogue to then, hold each other accountable, then possibly people want to stay and they won't want to leave because you are listening to their voices and everyone feels like they are being heard and can contribute. So I appreciate that. So we've got a little over 10 minutes left, a little under 15. I want to make sure that we're getting some more questions from the chat and also speaking to some of the previously submitted questions here. So Douglas asked earlier, something that we are working on now is trying to get the ball rolling on our company's DEI initiatives. We want to create a survey to get a baseline understanding of who our employees are and try and move the needle in positive directions for our own diversity internally. Do you have any best practices on how to create a survey or survey questions that address collecting diversity data?
You know what? I will say I don't have any best practices that I can like rattle off, but that's another one of those things where that's not our area of expertise. But I know that there are so many tools and resources out there for that. I don't know how large your organization is, but I do know of one tool that I'm pulling up now, and I'm going to share it with you. That one of our clients uses to do just that, and it's called Thought Exchange. Okay, so Thought Exchange is a tool, a surveying tool that allows real-time feedback. That for initiatives similar to what you're speaking to from the team, especially large teams that can consolidate that survey data very quickly and provide insights. So Thought Exchange is a good tool.
Awesome. I love that. Again, collaborative. I love that. So yes, Douglas writes, our team is about 250. So great. And
Okay.
Good luck, Douglas. I love that the integrity is there to want to make sure that you're being inclusive. And I think that if we can practice empathy a little more, like I said before, I love speaking about emotional intelligence. What would you like to see from a survey like that if you were receiving that survey? So maybe, having some, virtual coffees and starting to pull these stories out of your internal team and then including some of those in the survey. I love the thought sharing method as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Nicole writes in the chat here, I'm a new people operations manager, and I'm trying to find the best way to grow our DEI committee in a thoughtful way. I have heard a few current committee members tell me that they do not want to be involved as much as they used to due to their current workload. So I want to determine the best approach on how to proceed. Any suggestions are welcome. So Nicole's not alone in this. Like you said before in the introduction, lots of folks are being hired into these new roles. And then, of course, you have to go into how the company organization has already either approached or not, and then figure out a new way to create change. So again, Nicole's looking for any suggestions on how to be how to determine the best approach to proceed there when folks maybe don't want to participate because of their workload.
Yeah. So what I would do in that instance, Nicole, and again, I want to empathize with you because that is such a common theme, competing priorities, and the conventional workload taking precedence over this work. So what I would do, Nicole, is I would go to whoever hired you, okay, your boss, okay, or whoever you have the closest relationship to, that can help voice the need, not only help voice it, but also create the space. Okay, so who's the HR manager that can go to the VP or the CEO to say, we are, as a company, we believe that this work is important. So therefore, every such and such day at such and such time, this is a this is a no touch zone in terms of time. We're carving this time out for this work. No meetings can take precedence over this. This for this committee. This committee has precedence. That's what you have to do. And unfortunately, due to power dynamics within organizations and corporations, if you don't get that stamp of approval and that stamp of support from leadership that are going to carve out that time and make it, golden, then it's not going to happen. So that's what I would do. I would, in addition to continuing to, talk to your colleagues and help, to get them involved, maybe you or a group of you go to leadership and say, this is what you need. I hope that helps.
Awesome, thank you. And we've also got folks adding their ways of resolving this as well. So I appreciate the communal feedback here. Just for the sake of time, I won't read that. So I invite you all to jump in the chat. Karine, thank you for writing that reflection. So we've got about 9 minutes left. And I would love to touch on this question that was previously submitted. I'm interested in how to make the efforts stick after the one-day session. So I'm assuming they're referring to, the change up tool, that we do at Grow Dialogue. So just again, to reiterate the importance of accountability and making time to continue to do the work. So this person writes, I'm interested in how to make the efforts stick after the one-day session.
Yeah. And actually, before I answer that, I just want to go back to Douglas because I shared Thought Exchange, and looking at his question again, I want to share that they can help you with crafting the questions and everything. That's their expertise. And they that's what they do. So I just wanted to, and I typed the name in the chat so you can see Thought Exchange. If you look them up, I think that's the tool you're looking for. Okay, so yes. And in addition to, that question that was asked, that was pre-submitted, to reiterate, because, we've definitely covered it and everything that we've said. How do we make it stick? How do we make it sticky? And that's really what the change up process is designed to do. And, I'm hoping that everyone who joined today now have a better idea. Although you couldn't visually see it, we're going to give you an opportunity to, let us know if you want a demo where we will actually give you a visual, explanation of how the change up tool works, a demonstration on how the change up tool works. But that's how you make it sticky. It's, again, getting the leadership support to say, these meetings are a priority. We're going to have these monthly meetings where we're creating the structure and accountability around making sure that we're, creating the behavior change needed to show that we are truly honoring the fact that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is important for us. So those are the things. And then having a process like Change Up or something else that allows you to come back to the table month in, month out to say, are we being who we say we want to be when we wrote those objectives? And if not, what do we need to change in order to do so? Doing that month in and month out, month in and month out is what makes it sticky.
It's like working out or picking up a new eating habit. We don't have a button that gets us into whatever shape we want to be in, or that helps us to stop eating that and eating more of something else. So I just love the reiteration of practice makes perfect, and perfection isn't even something that we're reaching towards now. We're going towards authentic dialogue, mutual consent, collaboration and visionary leadership. So, take perfectionism out of that. This is the part of the old system. And if we want to build a new system, we have to think differently. So I appreciate that response there. I'd love to just use these last couple moments to dive in deeper on authentic dialogue. I know that we're speaking specifically about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. But as we noted earlier, authentic dialogue is a big it's kind of like the glue, in my opinion, of all of it, because if we aren't bringing our authentic selves to any effort, then we're not really being fair, and we're not actually practicing these methods of being diverse, inclusive, and equitable. So why did you find the need, just speaking personally to you, Dr. Sundiata, to develop this authentic dialogue model and then implement it in the Change Up tool?
Yeah, so I learned about authentic dialogue during my doctoral studies. This actually came out of a group of organizational leaders at MIT back in the 90s. They developed this concept of authentic dialogue from indigenous practices of communication and collaborative communication, and they started taking it into large multinational organizations in the 90s and impacting major change. And I read a book called Authentic Dialogue and the Art of Thinking Together, and basically adopted those practices into the work that we do. But authentic dialogue is a communication framework that leverages conflict. It leverages our differences to bring us closer together. Whereas our conventional ways of communicating are usually rooted in debate. It's usually rooted in competition, or us versus them, or I'm right, you're wrong, where authentic dialogue goes in the complete opposite. It takes those diverse thoughts, it takes those diverse backgrounds, those diverse perspectives and opinions, and helps us to tease out common ground and then ways that we can move forward together. And the whole process just garners so much, psychological safety, as well as collaborating to make decisions and resolve conflict in ways that strengthen the team and the organization. So yeah, I'll stop there because I know we have to get in our survey for anyone who wants a demo. Are you going to tee that up, Mariella?
Yeah, I'm going to start to present now, just to give our closing remarks, and then I'll pass the mic back to hr.com. We just want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to us today. And we will also be sharing a poll with you all if anyone's interested in getting more information about Grow Dialogue. And if you'd like to experience the demo and just, keep in touch with us, please participate in the poll. And Dr. Soon-Jahta, any closing notes, any food for thought before I pass the mic back to hr.com? I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and obviously, to see the integrity behind the work that you do. It's beautiful to just hear you speak. So I appreciate the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. First off, thank you, Mariella, for moderating and leading us through this important conversation. I want to thank all of the participants. Thank you for being here. Your time is valuable. We talked about competing priorities, and you chose to spend an hour with us today, and I'm truly grateful for that. And I hope that you learned something that you can take away and help you to further develop in this area, so that you can make a change. Because I know if you're here, you're someone who has a heart for people, and you have a heart for impacting positive change holistically. And so therefore you're my people, and I appreciate you for being here. So, thank you. And thank you again to hr.com for this space and this opportunity. It was truly a pleasure. Have a great one, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sundiata. And Kathy, I pass the mic back to hr.com. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Mariella. This concludes our webcast today. I would like to thank our presenters as well as all of you for joining us. If you joined late and would like to view the webcast again, the recording and slides will be available on hr.com in our archived webcast page. Your HRCI credit will appear in your account within 2 business days, and we also send out an email with the credit information. Please take a few moments to fill out the webcast survey that will open on your screen. Your feedback is very important to us. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of the event.